Hi, everyone. Thanks for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff, and I'll be your host for the show. Tonight's guest is Martin Fink. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Martin, let's jump right into things. Please give us a brief bio on yourself.
My name is Martin. I'm from Austria, Styria to be precise. The encounters happened in an area called Fürstenfeld. To be precise, Altenmarkt by Fürstenfeld. I work as a teacher and I had many jobs in my life. And right now I live in Graz with my girlfriend.
A lot of people have an idea in their heads of what Austria is like as far as the layout of the land. Can you paint a picture for us of what the area that you're in looks like?
Well, the area has really thick forests, and Styria is especially called the green lung of Austria, so I think you can all imagine how the layout looks like. It's thick, old forests that goes deep and has these deep run-through. It's not a flat surface, it's with hills, and if something or someone wants to hide, you can pretty much hide there pretty good. So it's not a flat surface, the forests are hilly, if that's the correct term. And the little roads we have, of course we have the Autobahn, which is a big highway, but the little country roads we have are big enough to support one car. If another car comes from a different direction, you have to drive aside so the other car can pass. And these roads usually go through forests, and the forest areas are really big and thick. So you can see a little bit through, but not entirely. So you can see maybe 3-4 meters, and that's it.
Ooh, that is pretty thick. In the United States, if you say that you saw a dogman, because we're such a cynical country, you're not treated very well. Over there, if you did come out and share the fact that you had an encounter or encounters, like in your case, how would you expect to be treated?
Most people will call you crazy or will tell you that you have seen too many horror movies. They won't believe you. Also, Austrians tend to be very sarcastic, so maybe they say, yeah, I totally believe you, and such things, but no, they don't believe you.
Sounds like they're not all that different from the way people are over here then.
Not really.
Yeah, I guess that shouldn't come as a surprise. Well, let's not waste any more time, Martin. Let's jump right into these encounters that you had. About 9 years ago, you had your first encounter. Please tell us all about that encounter. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
First of all, I want to give a layout of the area so you can all follow me when I'm talking about the encounter. My parents' house is up hills in a valley with a few other houses, and the valley is surrounded by a thick forest area. You can drive down hills from this valley. There are 2 roads, one to a little village down hills, and you have to cross a bridge before you get to the village. And the other road, it takes 15 minutes with a car to get to the city. It's a little city, but anyway, in Austria you're not allowed to drive until 18, but at 15 you're allowed to make a moped license. So that's a very low-powered bike. It goes maybe 20 to 25 miles an hour. I was 15 at the time, and I had my moped license, and I visited a friend down at the village. So I drove down, we spent the day together, it got dark out, it was late fall, what I remember, and I stayed a little longer than I usually did. So it got pretty dark outside. And this little road that goes through the forest to the village, it has absolutely no street lights. So all I had was my little lamp on my moped that gave out a little light. But anyway, so it's gotten dark outside, and I was driving up hills towards my parents' house again. As soon as I was on the bridge, I could see something on the right side in the forest. As soon as the bridge ends, there starts the forest line on the right side, and this forest goes all the way up. All the way the road goes, there is forest. And I could see movement on the right side, but I didn't know what it was, and at that time I didn't care. I thought it may be a deer or something. So I was driving, and as soon as I passed the point where I thought I saw movement, something stepped out on the road, and I only saw it when I looked in the side mirror, and I saw these these big yellowish eyes not far away from me, maybe 2 feet. And this thing, whatever it was, followed me halfway through the forest until we reached a little fork. A farmer has cut a little way into the forest and made a barrier there, like a railroad barrier that was always down, and this thing always stayed behind me 2 feet. As soon as we were at this spot, this thing just beamed towards the barrier and jumped right over it and ran into the forest, and it was fast. It was maybe, my moped, as I already told, went 20, 21 miles an hour. This thing could easily have gotten me. It went 2, 3, maybe 4 times as fast as my moped. Yeah, that was my first encounter with this Dogman. I want to add, we don't have bears or wolves in Austria. We had one bear a few years back, but not in my area. This was on the other side in Austria, and he crossed to Bavaria and was shot. So we don't have bears or wolves, and why should a deer follow me so close behind for such a long period of time? It's not. Yeah, this would be my first encounter. This thing didn't make any noise, just when it stepped out to the road. The bushes and the little trees that were put aside, this was the only noise this thing made. There was no other noise. No. Well, maybe there was noise, but I couldn't hear it because of the engine of my moped. But no growling, no other sounds.
I've got some follow-up questions for you, Martin, about that encounter you just went over, but before I get into that, I've got to tell you, you're doing so much better now than you were the first time we spoke about these encounters. I could hear you shake the first time we had that conversation. I hear a little bit now, but I can tell you're doing much better, and I can't tell you how good that makes me feel. That's such good news.
Yeah, talking about it really makes it better.
Oh, I'm so glad it's helped. My first question for you about that encounter is, you said that the eyes were only about 2 feet or so away from you. From what I understand, if they were only 2 feet away, you're saying that at any time it could have reached out and grabbed you because of how close it was.
Yes,
Ooh,
yes, this is true. Because if you look in the side mirror, things seem to be a bit closer to you than they actually are. But when I looked into my side mirror, this thing was right behind me. So I estimate I tried it with my buddy. Later on, he went behind my moped while I was standing. We tried it, and it's maybe 3 feet, but not much more.
that's horrible. How far down that road did it follow you at that distance?
The road itself, it's maybe 4 kilometers, and it followed me for nearly 2 kilometers before it went off in the forest again.
Was there anything that happened that seemed to trigger it leaving you and veering off the road, or did it just seem to do that at will?
It seemed just to do that at will, because there wasn't another car or another vehicle coming. It was just strange. I'm glad it left, but I don't know why it left.
Through the course of this ordeal, did you ever hear it make any sound?
No, it was totally silent. The only noise it did make was when it came out of the forest. The little bushes that were pushed aside, that was the only noise. Otherwise, it was silent.
I realize it would be hard to do and guess, but looking in that rearview mirror, looking at those eyes behind you, were you able to form an idea on how high off the ground those eyes would have been?
Yes and no. My side mirror was a bit to the top. It was a little bit sideways tilted, so it goes a little bit to an angle. And how tall, I would say around 1 meter 50 centimeter, around that.
So just about a meter and a half in height off the ground.
Yes, yes.
That's more than enough to shake anyone up.
Yeah, and we don't have any other animals here that get so tall. Well, deer, but I know what a deer looks like. And this wasn't a deer.
Oh, I've got no doubts about that. Whatever it was, it definitely wasn't a deer.
No, I don't think it was a person, because a person would have problems up hills with that speed by foot. I don't think it was a normal person. Well, first of all, the problem with these yellowish eyes. Why would a person put yellowish contacts in and follow me for 2 kilometers? No, no.
With it being behind you, the only light source back there that could cause its eyes to reflect like that would be your tail light.
Well, my tail light is red. It has to be on every moped here. So I don't think it was the reflection from the tail light. Maybe it's the natural reflection, because here have a white-ish reflection if they come in contact with light, but I think it was my light that I was able to see the eyes, that I was able to see a little bit. what's behind me, but I don't think it was reflecting. And I don't know if it was the moonlight, but I guess not.
What was the illumination like from the moon that night?
It was a very dark night. It was very, very dark, and normally I was never scared to drive through there because even as little kids we played in these forests and nothing ever happened. But I don't know. It was dark and the taillight has a little radius. It's really close to the moped itself that it illuminates. So I guess that's the reason I was even able to see the eyes. Otherwise, I wouldn't able to see anything.
Well, that's understandable. A lot of dogmen are black. In fact, most dogmen seem to be black in color, so if it's that dark of a night out, you've got a black creature behind you, especially if your rearview mirror was dirty at all, I could understand why the eyes would be all that you'd be able to see, so that wouldn't be all that surprising. Well, let's get into the second encounter you had, Martin. About a year after that encounter, you had another one. Please tell us about that.
Yeah, a year after that, I started working at my first job as a chimney sweeper, and the job consisted of cleaning stoves and so on, and also to get rid of the cooled down ash. The healthiest way for the environment is to get rid of the ash on an open field or the forest. So I took the ashtray and went into the forest, and there was this little staple of wood that the farmer had put there, and I was at a higher position and could look down on what's going on. It was a little bit like a cliff of sorts. Down there, I only saw its head, and it was stalking deer. It had this massive head of a German shepherd like, but with a really, really dark brown fur, dark brown coat, nearly black. As I saw it, I just got out of there as fast as I could. I only saw the side profile of its head, and it looked like a massive German shepherd. And I know the dogs that lived around this area because I had to go to most of the people while I was at this job, and I know nearly every dog that lived there, and nobody had such a big dog.
When you saw this creature, Martin, did it ever focus its gaze on you, or was it just there paying attention to something else?
It was just stalking deer. It never paid attention to me. Maybe it paid attention as I got out of there, but I don't have eyes on the back of my head, so I don't know. I guess not. It was just stalking deer, and it wasn't standing up. It was maybe crouched down. It really looked strange. It looked too big to be the height looked too tall to be a dog, but too small to be standing up. Maybe it has dwarfism. No, I don't know.
That had to be something to see. When you went into the woods with that ashtray to dump it, how far from your coworkers did you wind up being when you saw this creature? Were you just barely inside the wood line, or were you pretty far in where nobody could come to help you?
Oh, I walked about 500 meters in, and we usually worked alone, so I had no coworkers with me. I was all on my own.
Oh, well, that certainly changes things. I hate the idea that you saw that creature, whatever it was. Maybe it was a dog man, maybe it wasn't, but at least it didn't look at you. I think it would have been a lot worse if it would have focused on you.
Yeah, I think if it saw me, would have gotten me because the house owners were in their house, so I don't think they would hurt anything if something happened outside in the woods. So I'm glad it didn't look at me.
Especially if you're that far away from the house, that far into the woods, they probably never would have known that anything was happening to you. That wouldn't be a good situation at all.
Yeah.
Now, you said this happened roughly a year after that first encounter, Martin, but do you remember what month this second encounter happened in?
I don't remember the exact month, but I remember it was fall again. All my encounters happened in fall, so maybe it has something to do with the time of the year that they come around. I don't know. I really don't know, but it was fall again because the trees weren't green anymore. And when I think about it, it was just how many kilometers from here? Maybe 14 kilometers from my first encounter, airline. So it was pretty close to my first encounter.
Yeah, that is pretty close.
Yeah, I guess 14 to 15 kilometers airline. The roads would take longer, but
For something like that, that distance wouldn't be anything. That's less than half a day's travel, so that might be the same thing that was behind you that night on the road. It probably wasn't, but I guess it is a possibility. Let's move on to this third encounter you had. You said it happened roughly 2 years ago. Please tell us about that one.
yeah, I had a pretty bad fight with my girlfriend back then. I was angry, I wasn't thinking straight, and I wanted to have time for myself. So I took a drive. I drove to the forest line to this little pond, what we call Eisdeich, roughly translated to ice pond. It's usually a place where you can fish, or in the winter it's used for ice skating. And a little path leads towards the camping site that's just on the edge of the town. So you go all the way from the village to the town through the forest, and I just went there to clear my mind. I was walking maybe half of the route, and in the middle of this little route there is this picnic table. It is a picnic table, but it's made out of two pretty big trees that were cut in the middle and then put on stilts. So it looks pretty cool. But as soon as I got to this place, it was a little open space, so you can see better and everything. As soon as I got there, everything went silent, and for the first time in my life, I felt like prey. So I don't saw anything, but I felt like prey, and it was silent. No birds, no other forest sound, nothing. I didn't run back to my car, but I went slowly back to my car. I didn't take the full route to the campsite because then I would have to go deeper in the forest, and I didn't want that with that feeling that I'm prey and something stalking me or looking at me. Yeah,
Through the course of this experience, you never did see anything?
I never did see a thing. The forest just went silent, like someone pressed the mute button, and I felt like prey. I felt like I'm on a tablet and I'm on the menu. And I never had this feeling before. Even when I had the first encounter, I never felt like prey. And on the way to the car, nothing happened. as I covered halfway to my car, the sound started again, and I heard birds and everything again, but I don't know what that was, but yeah.
When all this was going on, Martin, did you ever smell anything strange?
No, I have a really bad sense of smell, so my colleagues commented on that a lot back then because I could stand next to sheep and goats and whatever and I wouldn't smell a thing, so no, I smelled nothing.
You must have a bad sense of smell, considering how billy goats like to pee on their own beards. If you can't smell that, it must not be a very keen sense for you.
No, it's certainly not.
Oh, that's all right. Let's get into this last experience you had. It happened roughly 6 months ago, you said.
Yes, I live in Graz now, but I visit my parents here and there, so they still live in this valley. And I was driving from the village, from my first encounter, because it's the closest road you got towards the valley. I was driving up there to meet my parents, towards my parents' house, and it's gotten dark outside. As I drove through the forest, I looked into my side mirror and could see something running on the side of my car. Well, you don't have to imagine what I did. I drove a little bit faster and drove to my parents' house, which is right next to an old fire brigade. And the fire brigade has a floodlight on. Normally, this floodlight never goes on, only when a person or a child is walking by, not when a car is driving by, because that's a little bit too far away from it to trigger it. So I parked down at my uncle's driveway because it was a straight driveway and my parents' house is a little bit, even in the valley, it's a little bit uphill, so you have to drive upwards towards it, and even then it really don't have that much parking spots, especially if the car is parking in front of it. So I usually park at my uncle's. The floodlight right behind me is going on, and I only saw the outlines of it, but it looked like a dog standing up with this triangle-shaped ears, and it was just massive. It was... Imagine John Cena with fur. I didn't know what to do because I knew if I got out of this car, this thing would have gotten me. So I drove a little bit backwards and up to my parents' house and got into the house and locked the door behind me. And right when I locked the door behind me, I could hear something breathing heavily just outside the door. It was just at an angle where I didn't see it through the stained glass window. It was maybe, I don't know, it was just at the side of the door, just to my left, and I could hear it. It was like a big, tall man that just ran a marathon and was out of breath. And I just got down behind the door and listened to it for nearly 15 to 20 minutes, and then it just left. And yeah, that was my last encounter with this thing. I don't live there anymore, so I don't know if something else happened, but I don't think anyone else saw it, or I hope not.
After you got into your parents' house, Martin, did you wake them up to let them know about what you had seen, or did you wait until the morning to mention it?
I did tell my mother and told her that there is something big outside, or there was something big outside. She just told me that, well, it must be my imagination, or maybe it was a deer. She was very tired that day, so she went back to sleep, and yeah.
When you have something like that happen to you and you get that kind of response, it definitely doesn't help the recovery process, to say the least. So I really hate to hear about that. That's not good.
I think it's understandable because we don't have any big animals besides deer in this area, but I would have expected at least a bit more understanding. After all, she is my mother. Yeah.
Oh, of course, more understanding, more compassion. That would have been nice to get anything like that from her, but I can understand, like you said, when you're talking about something that's not supposed to exist, I can understand why it would be so hard for someone who didn't see it the way you did to have such a hard time believing that you saw what you did see. Now, having said that, I've got some questions I want to run by you. First of all, is a fire brigade a fire station? If not, what is a fire brigade?
Yeah, it's a fire station. It's a really, really small fire station with only 2 cars in it, and nobody is there stationary. People just go there if there's an alarm, but aside from that, nobody's ever there.
Oh, I see. Another question I have for you about that encounter is when you were driving down the road trying to get away from it, in between when you saw it the first time and when you got home and went into the house, do I understand you correctly that, at least momentarily, you outran it?
Yes, it was running beside the car, and it was keeping up with me because it isn't a straight road, so it's not that safe to drive too fast on this road. And it caught up at me as I just drove in at my uncle's driveway. It was at the fire brigade that's maybe 250 meters away from my uncle's house. So, yeah.
You told me in the pre interview that only two people you've told about this didn't laugh at you. You said your girlfriend was one, but who was the other person?
A friend of mine from school back then, Michael, was a great guy. Sadly, he moved away a long time ago to start his own family. He wanted to investigate, but I didn't want to get into this forest where this thing came out from. Not in a million years. If you would gave me $1 million to get out there at night and search for it, I would decline.
That's totally understandable after what you've been through. I hope wherever Michael is now, I hope he isn't beating the bushes out in the woods looking for these things because, like they say, be careful shaking trees because you never know when a leopard might fall out of one.
Yeah, I told him to stay away from it because this thing, when I saw it, it was so massive and tall. I am 5'7", and the next day I went to the fire brigade and I stood at the exact spot where I saw it. And this thing must be at least a head taller than me, so I wouldn't search for it, even with weapons, even with a gun. I don't think a gun would do much to a thing that massive, unless you have a 50 caliber. But no, I would search for it.
It's good that you understand that.
I don't think a normal hunting rifle or any normal ammunition would do much damage. from other interviews, what I've heard, no hunting ammunition does much damage. So maybe a 50 caliber military bullet, something like that. Something that's normally used to take down tanks or something would help, but who carries guns that big around?
That is a good point. You might be right. That might be what's required to take one of these things out. I'd hate to be the one to try and test that, though. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. Let's talk about the ramifications of this encounter now. You mentioned that when you told your girlfriend about this encounter, she did not laugh at you. Tell us about her response when you did share the fact with her that you had had these encounters.
She did understand. She didn't understand what animal I've seen, and I don't think she believes in Dogman, but she certainly could see the fear in me. So she believed me that something is out there, and she promised me to never go alone to the forest when we are at my parents' house. So there's that. Maybe it's because of her culture, maybe it's that, but I'm not sure. She isn't Austrian, by the way.
It helps so much when you have someone like that that's that close to you that you can talk to at the drop of a hat about what you've been through, what you're feeling, and whatnot. That means so much. I'm so glad to hear about that.
Yeah, I'm glad to have her. She's just great. She's the greatest person I've ever met. I'm glad to be together with her. So
You're lucky to have her. It's so good that you do. That's really good news. What kind of changes have you made in your life after having these experiences?
well, I never went into the woods at night again, and I got my weapon permit to get guns, and I only go in the woods when it's daytime and with a larger group of friends. And even then, I bring a gun with me, at least a handgun. I know it won't do much or any damage to this thing, but just knowing that you have a weapon with you gives you some sense of security, as stupid as this sounds. I went to university after that and moved to Graz, and I stayed at Graz after that. It's a really large city. It doesn't have a big forest, maybe just a little foresty area around the thing we call Wurturm, but I don't think that there is any animals bigger than a squirrel there. So
Not to frighten you, Martin, but understand, I highly doubt that you have any dogmen in that area since it is so highly populated, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't at least let you know and other people listening to this show know they are seen within the city limits, even within the city limits of large metropolitan areas. For example, there's a lady who saw one within the city limits of a place called Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm not sure how familiar you are with cities in the United States, but Cincinnati's not exactly a small town. She did report seeing one inside the city limits of a city that was that big, so that kind of makes you wonder what is off limits for these things.
yeah, it's really scary to think about. I've been to Washington because my dad's from America, but that's about it. Washington, Aberdeen, and I live pretty much at the heart of Graz. So I hope that nothing gets there. And even if something gets there, I'm in the fifth floor, so
Yeah, if you're on the fifth floor, you should be just fine then. Well, Martin, it's about time to get out of here. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
yeah. If you saw a dogman and you like to report, you're not crazy. there are many people out there that saw one. Please, whatever you do, don't do anything to provoke them or go after them or go looking for them. That's the worst thing I can imagine someone could do. Yeah, that's about it. So,
Martin, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show tonight and sharing the details of all those experiences. I really do appreciate it.
I have to thank you, Vic. You helped me so much. More than you know.
Well, see, that's the thing. I don't feel like I did help you all that much. Any help I can give, it does make me feel good about those, so it is really good to hear you say that.
Yeah, I feel more comfortable now. I still wouldn't go out in the dark in the woods, but my thermal is gotten better. My hands aren't shaking anymore that much, so it's gotten a lot better.
That right there is great news to me.
Yeah, just to know that you're not crazy and you're not the only one that saw these things, and talk with people who saw these things is just great. It gives one so much comfort, and if anyone out there saw one, the best thing you could do is contact you and talk with people that saw these things. Because I don't think you can go with a Dogman encounter to a psychiatrist, and they would tell you that you're crazy and lock you up or give you medicaments or something else. Probably.
Yeah, that's a good point. The people I know who have tried that didn't fare very well, so I think you're right on the money with that. Well, thanks again so much for coming on, Martin. I really do appreciate it. You have yourself a great night, okay?
Thanks. You too, Vic.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. If you've had a Dogman encounter and you'd like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, you can reach me at contact@dogmanencounters.com. I'd love to hear from you.